because we pour so much of our time into learning your facts and learning the nuances of the law, it's almost like you feel for these people, right? So you want to do the best you can in order to get a fair and reasonable
result. All right, everybody, welcome to another great episode of Cases Gone Wild. I'm your host, Jon Marko of Marko Law. I bring you the craziest, wildest, most insane, exciting law stories from my career and our esteemed guest's career every 2 weeks here on the show. Please watch us, share us with your friends. We're filming live so you can see our pretty faces, and you can watch us on YouTube. Today, we have a very special guest. We have one of my good friends who's a great lawyer, and I'm very excited to have her on the show today because I've seen her career from being a baby lawyer all the way until the titan of the industry that she is now today. Angela, thanks for coming to the show. We have Angela Baldwin on the show today.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here, and so are our guests once they hear all about you. So you're currently at the Miller Law Firm, a very respected law firm in downtown Detroit office. You guys have offices, I understand, other places, but you're in downtown Detroit, which I love because Marko Law is not too far from your office downtown, which I've had the pleasure of going to. You do, tell us about the type of law you do, because it's like complex, high-level stuff. I always love talking to lawyers about complex, high-level stuff.
Yeah, so a large portion of my practice involves complex business litigation, right? And you say that, and well, what does that exactly mean, right? So it can range from landlord, tenant disputes, contract issues, shareholder disputes. What I've noticed about shareholder disputes, it's similar to a divorce, except for with business partners. So those can be pretty contested. The class action lawsuits are definitely, the high power sexy cases. We were first on the opioids matter, settled the EpiPen epidemic. So those cases actually do really well for the firm and for our clients. But I mean, all types of business matters we handle it, Fortune 500 companies to a mom and pop shop who, just got taken advantage of for some reason or another. So
when you do these class actions, are you representing like the injured people who are hurt? Or?
Yeah, we represent the injured people who are hurt. So, the opioids epidemic is really something that took me by surprise. I didn't realize how that hit so many people from so many different demographics. I had an attorney friend of mine, she does really well, and her husband had a broken leg. He went into the hospital and came out an addict, right? And these are professional people who've, they don't have a drug history, and all of a sudden, now you've got an issue because you're trusting in the medical system, the doctors, people telling you that it's okay. So those cases have been very fulfilling. They're very long cases, which is in contrast to some of the election law matters that we handle, which is the complete opposite spectrum. So with the election law matter, everything is an emergency because you are dealing with access to the ballot. You are dealing with people's names being on the ballot, the printers, voters who are overseas that need access to it. So you might have the luxury in general law to look at your brief a few times and to make sure all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. But election law, everything is an emergency motion. So you've got to handle all of that on the fly.
Yeah, election law is its own very niche area of the law, and it moves very quickly, right? And it's usually once every 2 years generally. I mean, when we have like the major elections, right?
Yeah.
There's always some vacancies and some other weird stuff in there, but
It is mostly, you do have those big ones, but you also have a lot of elections that are on a smaller level. People who are, on the board of trustees, maybe have a vote of lost confidence in their constituents. So the interesting case that we handled, we actually made the law as it relates to one of the election laws we handled several years ago, and that was due to an affidavit of identity. And when I talk about how particular these cases get, I mean, if you've got font that's an incorrect size, if you've got somebody who you've trusted, a lot of these people pay the firms that are not from here, right? Because they think they're getting their money. So your firms in DC, those types of names where they might not have a good relationship, and they trust them to get petitions. You've got to have X amount of petitions. Well, it's happened to several, unfortunately, people who are running, and they think they have valid signatures and they're fraudulent signatures.
Yeah. So just so our listeners who don't know how this works, when you run for, I've talked to a lot of judges about this because it's such a nitpicky type thing almost. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when you run for judge, which is, our judges are elected here in Michigan. Now, if a judge dies or there's a vacancy, a judge leaves or whatever, then the governor can appoint. But all of our judges in the state are elected, which means the voters select the judges. But to run for judge, to be on that ballot that we get,
yes,
and put our vote on, they have to obtain signatures, right?
Yes.
Like, how many signatures do they need? Do you remember?
I mean, you would want to get over 1,000 signatures. Ideally, you would want, whatever is requested, you want to go double. Way over, you want technically double the amount, because it can be so nuanced as you didn't fill the top heading out correctly. Therefore, all of those 50, 60, 100 signatures are gone, right? They're gone, right?
And when we say signatures, like, this is just like, John Doe or Jane Doe out at the grocery store, or I know they have these people, they'll walk around downtown or they'll be outside the courthouse, and they'll just say, hey, will you support my candidacy? Obviously, friends and family, too. Let's say, Judge Smith or whatever's running. And then people say, okay, and they fill out, and they just sign, and then they put their name and address? Or
they just sign. They're supposed to put their name and address. First and foremost, you have to live in the district of which you're signing. So sometimes people who are passing those petitions out are, one, maybe not voters, two, don't live in the district. I mean, we had some, highly public officials run, for seats such as, governor's seat. And what happened?
Jim Craig ran, remember? And he got thrown out.
Exactly. I told him, I'm like, you should have hired our firm.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. He's great. He's actually, I think he's going to run again this go around. And, we had a discussion in terms of, what to look for and
how to do it right.
How to do it right, exactly.
Because you get thrown out on a technicality. I mean, Jim Craig, for example, for our listeners who don't know or from around the country, he was the former police chief, right, here in downtown Detroit. And then he ran for governor, a Republican primary, and he got thrown out because of these. He didn't have enough signatures because it wasn't just him, but it was like a lot of people, including like a lot of people running for judges and local office. They were paying money to these companies, like you said, and the company's job was to make sure that they had enough signatures. So the company would send out these lowly paid, I don't know what they were paid, minimum wage or it was garbage, or maybe they were paid per signature, I forget, but out to get the signatures. And a lot of these guys were just like faking signatures and stuff.
Oh, yeah,
weren't they?
Absolutely. There was a lot of fraudulent signatures. So imagine you are at a point in your career where you're leaving because you want to pursue a higher calling, so to speak, a public office, right? You've sacrificed a lot in order to do that.
Which usually involves a pay cut from a lot of people.
A pay cut. In addition, it's expensive to campaign.
Yeah.
So you've got all of you're going to all your friends, family, you're asking
Raising money
for them to
They're
raise
going to
money
Angela
into you.
Baldwin and Jon Marko saying, donate.
Yeah, exactly. And then what happens? You get knocked off of the ballot because of a technicality or because you're trusting somebody that's really not good at what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then say goodbye to that career. Say goodbye to all those people's money. How are you going to ask them for money next time?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly. And all the time and money and effort wasted. A lot of good people I know got knocked off because of this, and they didn't know.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people in Wayne County, I know, John Malone was running for judge, got knocked out because they hired these people. And these were people that like Jim Craig is like a big name,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So like, but it just got so bad. So, I mean, what do these people need to do? Like, what would you advise as an election law lawyer, Jim Craig, for example, or anybody else running on how not to get basically screwed over or bamboozled on these ballots?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, especially here in Michigan, it's a very niche field of law, right?
Yeah.
So if you are
like, I don't know shit about
and if you're gonna talk to somebody, you might not know, but hey, what attorneys would you recommend that handle this? And there's only a handful of us here in Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, so it really is just about doing your due diligence in terms of finding somebody who's reputable and looking at their track record, right? Like, I mean, for example, with you deal with a lot of high profile personal injury cases, civil rights matters. I'm sure that when people look into you before they retain you, they hear about the cases that you've won, what
Right.
you've done. I would highly suggest that anybody who's looking to nickel and dime on an election law matter, you get what you pay for, right?
Yeah.
So just keep that in
And
mind.
if you lose, you're done. I mean, you're
exactly.
out. So here's one thing that I learned, because, I've been, I love the law. Okay. I love talking to lawyers. That's why we have this show. I love talking to judges, defense attorney, all the people, but it's a dirty business, Angela.
Yeah.
Like, it is dirty. Yeah. So like what I understand is, like, let's say there's 5 people running for, I don't know, the governor or the judge. Other people who are running against, example, Jim Craig, right? Mm-hmm. Will like find people to challenge their signatures, pay them
absolutely
or whatever as like straw men and women to like knock them out.
Knock them off
so
the
like
ballot, yeah.
All these people are like, it's dirty. Like,
it is very dirty.
It's not the state coming in and saying like, oh, this doesn't meet this necessarily. It's like other competitors like trying to find technicalities to get people off.
Absolutely. And people get paid to do that.
Yeah.
Whether, right or wrong, people actually get paid to do that. And making it even more egregious, they'll do their due diligence in terms of finding law firms that are reputable in this regard. They will take interviews. I want to hire you. I'm thinking about, this is my issue. Let me confide in you. All of a sudden, they decide not to hire that attorney in order to conflict that attorney out from representing other people, other candidates.
I mean, that it's, and there's not that many lawyers,
No.
right? So it's not, yeah, that's dirty. There's, politics is a dirty game. That's why I'm never going to run for judge. And you open yourself up to, all that stuff. And
you should never say never.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. And the other problem is, you need a lot of money. Now, if you're not rich yourself, you need to find people who are going to give you a lot of money.
Yeah, who are going to support you.
Support you, because like you got to hire these judges and stuff I know who've been challenged, or, there's who's that crazy guy in Wayne County? He challenges like almost every judge. I forget that guy's. You know who I'm talking about.
Davis.
Yeah. Davis. Like this guy challenges like 10 people an election cycle.
Oh yeah.
And, these judges don't, if you're a sitting judge, you have to pay the Miller law firm, Angela Baldwin, or whoever you hire, out of your own money, some that you can raise, but I mean, it's a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's more money than they make in their yearly cycle, you know?
Yeah, interesting enough, the election law cases, unlike some of the criminal or civil matters, at least here, you know, in Michigan and in Detroit, we have all of those cases go to the chief judge. So any election law matter, since it is a specialty, Chief Judge Kenny, Colombo, I was in front of those guys all the time. Now we've got Judge Farsard, and they are the ones who are getting all those cases just because it is so nuanced, and it's not like you get inundated with no fault cases, right? So having a judge specializes really goes a long way in terms of understanding the nuances of the practice and getting a fair ruling.
Well, what's crazy to me is how technical it is, right? So like, you know, we talk about justice in general, and we want justice to be done, and we want it to be fair. You know, you get, you know, whether, you know, it's a business dispute gone awry or whatever, there's the law has a, you know, the goal of fairness and stuff. With this election law, it's just like black and white. Like, it's like God, what was the thing? Like the maiden name was put in and it shouldn't have been put in or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you just get disqualified from running because of, like you said, the font or something crazy.
Font size, yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. They've gotten creative in terms of some arguments and certain case law. We actually were able to do something very similar in one of our cases that relates to like an affidavit and basically argued like a strict scrutiny standard on it. And part of that is knowing your judges, knowing your panel, understanding where the priorities are, and tailoring your case and your argument to your audience, right? In order to get the best result.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that's something that I don't think a lot of lawyers know a lot about because it's such a nuanced section of the law. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are. I understand you're very involved in the Hispanic Bar Association, right?
Yeah. So I am a non-traditional, I guess you would call it, lawyer, right? So I practiced business for almost 10 years before I transitioned into law.
I would have never guessed that.
I was in Florida living my best life. I had a condo looking over the water. I saw the sunset every night. It was gorgeous, right? There was always something in my mind that really drew me to the law. And before I knew it, so much time had passed. And I said, you know what? If you're going to do this, you need to do it. So my sister ended up having her first baby in Michigan, and I wanted to be closer to home.
Where were you born?
I was born in Detroit.
Okay.
Born and raised in Detroit, Southwest Detroit, and moved after undergrad for business, and then I ended up moving back for law to go and practice law. So I moved in the middle of a polar vortex. I had no idea. I remember complaining how cold it was, and my dad looks at me like, "You are from here." And I go, well, my blood's thinned out. And by the way, there's a polar vortex. But it was a very difficult transition, but it was the best decision I made because I very much am of the impression, do it and not wonder what if. Like that would be a bigger fear to me, is wonder what my life would be like had I not taken this or done this. And it was a calculated risk. Overall, I am very happy I did it. And it's really done wonders in terms of the clients that I represent, understanding how the business works and understanding just being in corporate America, I think has made a really big difference in terms of how I represent and show up for my clients. So that was really, really big. I was appointed by the governor for the Hispanic Latino Commission of Michigan. So we advised on some legislation policies and equitable rights in terms of the state. But from a smaller scale, as president of the Hispanic Bar Association of Michigan, I was really proud in the work that we've done because you have some of these bar organizations, and I don't know about you, but sometimes you're wondering, what does my money go for if I, send X amount of dollars per year? We actually reinstituted a scholarship fund, which I was really proud to do, to help kids. I think, you perhaps went to one of those parties and
I
or
did.
donated
You guys throw
for
good
it.
parties too.
So,
the Hispanic Bar Association throws good parties.
Yeah.
So what's your background in regards to that?
So now I'm past president, and I serve.
No. Like, are you like Mexican? Like, do you?
Oh,
like,
my heritage.
Yeah,
I
heritage.
am. I am something that they call a Mexarican.
Okay.
It's a Puerto Rican and Mexican. The combination, they usually butt heads a lot. So usually people in the Hispanic community are like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
But yeah, so my mother's from Puerto Rico, my father's from Mexico.
Very cool. Very cool. So so I know I met you, and I remember.
How long ago was that? That's crazy.
God, I hate to think about it because it makes me sad that so many years went by. It was in Judge Yule's courtroom. Ed Yule, who's a great Wayne County Circuit Court judge, and you were, I think, clerking for him or interning from him. So you must have just been starting out.
Oh my goodness, that's how we met.
That's how we met. Yep, and you would come out and you would watch the lawyers argue, and I had some cases in front of Judge Yule. We tried a case in front of Judge Yule. I don't know if you were there when we had a trial. It was against Department of Corrections. It was a race discrimination case.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw bits and pieces of that case. Yeah, you did really well in terms of your performance in that case. There's certain attorneys who they walk into a courtroom and you don't forget.
Yeah.
Right? So you were definitely one of them.
So did you start? How did your career trajectory go?
So I spent some time at the Washtenaw County Public Defender's Office, the Wayne County. Spent some time at Wayne County. City of Detroit, I was the assistant corporation counsel, and it was actually after I worked for the city that I ended up taking a job in private practice. But something about working in the public sector, I just felt it's almost like you're doing a greater good. Now I make people who have tons of money more money, right? Yeah. But it was.
But hey, maybe you could run for judge someday.
Well, it's so interesting you say that, because I remember. You don't know what you don't know. So for me, for example, I grew up, in a not so great environment, first in my family to go to college, let alone law school. So the thought of being judge never even crossed my mind. And it wasn't until I clerked for Judge Yule where I looked and I go, I could do this.
Yeah.
Like I could do this. And I did a lot of the research and, drafting of some of the memorandums and opinions, and we would discuss some of those cases. But that was really the first time that I thought, wow, maybe this is something that I want to do later down the road.
Yeah.
when I can afford a pay cut.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's something that is a calling. It seems to be very rewarding from the experience that I had so far. And overall, I think I learned so much about the type of attorney I wanted to be, but also the type of attorney I didn't want to be.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that, because I clerked too. I clerked when I got out. I did appellate clerkship, which is a lot less fun than I think being at the trial court level, because you get to see trials and see the day-to-day. But one thing that really stuck out to me is you see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and and you see how you never want to be. And sometimes those experiences, like, you got to have a good mentor, you got to have good role models first and foremost, but to see what not to do and what to avoid, that can be just as important. You know?
Absolutely, and the relationships that you build Like this, for example, I completely forgot that that's where we met. And
So forgettable. Yes, I know.
no,
I'm just kidding. I'm
I
just
mean,
kidding.
I remember you and having a girlfriend who was just, a little crazy.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
what
Oh, yeah.
stands out most.
Yeah. I remember that too. So luckily I have a great fiance now who's also Hispanic, by the way.
Oh, I
Yeah,
did not know that.
Yeah.
Is that the first Latin lady you've dated?
This is the first and last.
buckle
so
up.
the first and last. Trust me.
Buckle up.
I've been buckled. I'm buckled. So let's talk. I got to tell you, I'm very impressed. I got to see firsthand the work that you did in a big, very important mediation that we had, along with my co-counsel Vince Colella, who's a good friend and great lawyer. Without getting into the specifics, it was a big case, and it was against a governmental entity. And we went to you and to your partner, Butch Hollowell, to mediate. And, I've been doing this long enough where I'm resistant to change. So when Vince, I've known you, but I've never mediated with you,
Yeah.
right? So I don't like to do new things because I know what's worked for me, right?
Yeah.
And Vince came to me and he said, look, this is a big case. We have a government on the other side. And I think that we should go to Butch Hollowell, who I had known you and Butch, but I had never worked with Butch before. And frankly, I had never worked with you before.
Yeah.
So I was like, Vince, are you sure? I got to tell you, I said, are you sure? I said, why don't we just go to my usual suspects, that I have been doing business with for a long time. And he's like, just trust me. And I said, for sure. And I was so impressed at the way that you guys handled the mediation, your knowledge at the mediation, your preparedness at the mediation, you working so hard on this very big, complicated case and getting a result that was able to resolve the case. Because I had told Vince before we went into that mediation, I said, this case is never going to get resolved. Why are we even wasting our time?
We hear that a lot.
Yeah. I ate those words. And it's
Wow.
not often that I do eat words like that. But it was a large part because you guys did such a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. It was interesting when we got that call. Immediately we're like, we're going to be conflicted out. There's no way that this is going to work, because we do represent a lot of governmental entities, and we disclose that to Vince, and he's like,
we waived the conflict.
That's exactly why we want you, because you guys are able to talk to both sides,
right,
and are able to actually bring both parties together. And we learn as lawyers about conflicts and things that we cannot take, but sometimes we don't think about how those relationships really help us to come to the middle and come to a resolution.
You're absolutely right. And the just so our listeners know who don't, so like, for example, like if I have a lawsuit against I don't know, an insurance company like Allstate, and the mediator, a lot of the mediators are lawyers, almost all are lawyers who work for the most part, defense firms or their own firm. But for example, in this case, your firm had actually represented as the lawyers and done work for the defendant.
Yeah.
And so you have to come to us and say, look, disclose that. Say, look, there's potential for a conflict of interest here because we do work for them in the past and you want to do work for them in the future, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we're allowed to waive that conflict to say, okay, thank you, but we're going to go with you anyways. And our listeners may say, well, why would you do that? Like, you have an interest, but you're exactly right. It can work both ways because we know that there's a potential, incentive there. But I find with good mediators, like you guys and other good mediators that I've used in the past, I've waived conflicts because you can have honest conversations with the client who you already have an established relationship with or had one, and they will listen to you.
Yeah,
and you can get
absolutely.
things done
Yeah,
because you're not a stranger, right?
Yeah. And that's, I think, the biggest benefit in terms of mediations. And it's another part of our practice, which is very much growing. And we initially thought, there's no way, we're too much connected on so many other ends, but it really has helped us tremendously in settling so many cases. And the biggest thing that I think has allowed us to be very successful in that, not just being a good advocate, but really caring not only about the attorneys who are coming into our office, but their clients and the cases that you guys have. Like, because we pour so much of our time into learning your facts and learning the nuances of the law, it's almost like you feel for these people, right? So you want to do the best you can in order to get a fair and reasonable settlement.
Result. So I got to tell about, without saying names, the dinner table setup that we had when we went into the mediation.
Oh my goodness. That's hilarious.
For our listeners, like, this is real, and it's like almost out of like the show Suits or something.
Very non-traditional, yeah.
Non-traditional. So in normal mediations that I like to do, I don't like to be in the same room as the defendants because I'm very opinionated and I can be argumentative. And for me to tell an insurance adjuster or a defense attorney why they're stupid or their case sucks or why they're screwed usually isn't very productive to getting the thing resolved. But Butch had I call it like a dinner setup. Oh. We came in, there was the big boardroom, and in front of each person in the boardroom was the menu, the dinner menu, but it was the itinerary. Yes. It was very formal and well put together, right? Very professional. Oh. And part of the menu...
Can't forget Aretha.
Aretha, that's right. That's right. And part of it was what? Tell us. Tell the listeners.
Well, part of it, we had it was a photo of Aretha Franklin, and he starts off, my partner Butch, he's amazing at what he does, but he starts off and he goes, "You see this painting?" He goes, "Aretha. RESPECT." Yeah. Right? So find out what it means to me. And the overall preface behind that was, it's very non-traditional for both sides to be in the room at the same time, but we're here for a very short period of time, and we're going to respect each other while we're here. And by the way, do introductions. And everybody went around the room to do introductions.
And there's like, how many people in there? 10 people, 15 people.
Yeah.
I had histories with some of the individuals in that room where I had some hard feelings. They didn't like me very much either. But
well, I think that's why you and Vince did such a good job in terms of evening each other out. Because John's like, I need no introduction.
Well, I said, we went around the room and everybody's like, "Hello, my name is Vince Colella. I'm a civil rights attorney. I've been doing this for X amount of years, and it's just good to be here." And I'm like, this is stupid because
oh my gosh, you did.
I was like the last guy, and I'm like, you all know who I am. If you don't settle this case, I'm gonna get a huge verdict. You don't need me to introduce myself. You know what's happened in the past. It's gonna happen again, and I forget what else I said.
Yeah, a complete blow up in the very beginning. Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm like, okay, great.
And I feel like Butch's jaw dropped, and everybody looked, and then one of the head defense attorneys looked like her head was going to explode, and she threw her purse down and said, "I'm going to leave. I'm not going to listen to this."
It took some time to get both sides, to come to a resolution after that. But overall, I think it was... It's uncomfortable in the very beginning, but it actually has served us really well in terms of moving the case along and, establishing some type of rapport and stories like this.
Well, I'll tell you, you guys did a great job. You got a very difficult case resolved. I didn't think it was going to get resolved. I'm just interested to see the next mediation that I have. If Butch is going to if you and Butch are going to forego the introduction phase.
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think we're going to forego that.
Well, tell us about some other crazy cases. You do a lot of non-competes, which is a niche. And just so our listeners know, so explain what a non-compete is.
So a non-compete is an agreement that businesses have if you want to protect a business interest. So for example, if I own a business, I've invested a lot of time and resources into an employee that I don't want someone else to reap the benefits of that perhaps is going to be in direct competition with me.
Yeah.
So the objective of a non-compete agreement makes sense if you have a something to protect in your business, such as confidentiality, trade secrets, or perhaps you are going in business with someone and you guys are starting the business off and you're relying on each other's knowledge, customers, clients, all that information that is really captured in someone's head, right? How are you going to protect yourself if that relationship goes bad? So we deal with a lot of, agreements that people think they're really good partners, friends, employees, and for some reason or another, somebody wants to leave and part ways. Well, they leave and they're with a direct competitor.
Yeah.
Right? So what's legal, what's not legal?
So do you represent the employee or the business? Because there's two very different.
Both.
Okay, both.
Both. We represent both. Yeah.
So, and look, this is an area where there's two very valid and competing interests. You have an employee, right, who wants to be able to work and who wants to be able to take their knowledge and go do other things. We all grow in our careers. Look at, you and I have both went from one job, when we, for whatever reason, either we maxed out or we wanted to pursue a different avenue or we, whatever, we kind of grow in our career. And then you have the employer who wants to invest in an employee and not have that used against them.
Yeah.
You see this a lot. It's easy to understand, I think, when you have like Ford Motor Company, right? Like, to me, that's like the easiest where we should have a non-compete. Ford Motor Company has an engineer working on like a brand new engine or whatever. They learn all this stuff and then they quit and go to General Motors or Toyota and then use all that against them, right? That to me is like a pretty easier thing. It gets harder in some of the other areas, right? And that's why, isn't there restrictions on non-competes? Like you can't say like, Ford can't say, engineer, you can never work again in any engineering job in America. Like that would be illegal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be illegal. So generally you have to have a reasonable time. So a year has been deemed reasonable, between, how
about 10 years? Between
a year to 3, anything pushing 3+, it hits the spectrum. 10 years would more than likely be deemed unreasonable. But,
and then what happens? The court rips up the agreement, says it's invalid? Or?
So the court has the ability to, it's what you call blue pen a contract or agreement. So they have the ability to say, well, the contract is null and void altogether, or we think that certain parts of the contract are okay. We don't like these contracts. This provision, we're going to blue pen it out, or we're going to revise it from 10 years to 3.
So they can like reform it equitably?
They can, they can reform it equitably. It has to be, reasonable in terms of geographic scope. So if you own a company in Detroit and you're saying to an employee or a business partner, you're not going to be working in the whole United States of America, well, you're going to have a problem there, especially if you're not in those other areas, if you don't have business ties and connections. So it's got to be reasonable in scope.
So time, scope, geographical area.
And you have to have a reasonable business interest to protect in the first place, right? So you can't just have a non-compete for anybody who works for you. There's been some discussion on like executive employees who they tend to have more strategic knowledge, which you see them enforced more so with executives rather than...
It's like the CEO of maybe Blue Cross going to a different insurance company or
people
something.
Who can do some real damage. Like if you're looking at an employee who's making minimum wage...
Like a custodian or something, right? Let the guy go work.
Exactly, let him work. You don't want to have an unfair restraint on trade. What gets interesting is there was a case where... we represented the individual and he was a highly sought after executive. and he ends up starting a business with his friend, and because he's so sought after, he goes and works for the business that him and his friends kind of like look up to, right? Like, this is the ideal type of business where we want to be and grow. When you're an entrepreneur, you're starting off, you're building your business, you've got certain levels that you're trying to get to. Well, on one end, it's like, wow, this is a great opportunity for my friend, you know, go for it. On the other end, it's like, no, I'm not letting you leave. Like, you help me build this business. You know information. You're going to compete, and you've got the ability to destroy what's mine, what we've built. So navigating that, and it's interesting because when people get so invested emotionally, that's when it makes it difficult to settle something, right? Just like when you've got divorces and they're fighting over the china. We all know it's really not about the china.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, and if the employer wins, they essentially can take someone away from the job, right? Let's say, Bill Smith goes and works for the competitor. If the employer, let's say it's Ford, wins, the court will order that person cannot go to work, essentially.
Yeah.
Right?
So they can basically say, no, if you're going to work, work in a different field. Well, okay. How do you tell that to somebody who in their resume has 20 plus years in sales, and then now you want me to work in a completely different department that I have zero experience in and be able to maintain my same amount of pay and lifestyle?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting depending on which side you sit on.
Right. Because I'm like, look, I'm an employment lawyer.
Yeah.
I believe, you got to let people earn their livelihood and earn their stuff. I'm also a business owner.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I wouldn't want one of my attorneys, for example, leaving and, stealing clients or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly what it is. It's clients, it's lists, it's, soliciting, sales. You had mentioned something earlier in terms of making you think twice. And there's this case that I had, and I really would like your thoughts on this and what you define as competition, right? So you've got, two people who are in business together. One, he signs a non-compete. He leaves. So he's not competing per se directly, but his brother opens up a shop, and his brother opens up a shop that is in competition with this guy. Now, in order in this industry, in order to even open up your own shop, you have to have somebody else in that field vouch for you, right? Got to have a sign off, like a referral. So he signs off the referral. All of a sudden, his old partner sees you're competing against me. You signed off on this business. He's like, wait a second. Yeah, for his brother. I'm not competing. I don't own any shares of the company. Like, I just signed this off. Oh, no. That's, and the argument is that competition, directly or indirectly. Like, how would you define that?
Yeah, that's what we like to call as lawyers one of the gray areas, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That is a complicated. I don't know. I mean, certainly, look, I don't control my brother. If he opened up a business and he just signed for him. Is that like almost being like a reference or something?
Yeah, but you can't get in that business if you don't have somebody sign for you. Yeah. So technically, he wouldn't be in a position to compete if he didn't sign for him. That is a close call.
I don't know the.
I know that's tough.
I don't know. Well, let me ask you. What I heard Biden passed the Biden's FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. Passed this rule that said non-competes are invalid generally now, or something to that effect. Tell us about this.
Yeah.
I heard it's on stay or something. What's going on? Because this is a big deal. That could wipe out all the non-competes, right?
Yes, it's definitely. I mean, there's certain places like California, for example, they don't have non-competes. But places here at Michigan where we do have it, it would be a huge disruption in terms of how people are, I mean, this is your argument for banning the non-competes. They don't want to restrain on trade. They don't want to affect employee mobility. And, ultimately their position is you can't squeeze out the little guy or monopolize the market, which makes sense. But what if you're business owner if you are a little guy, right? What if you are also trying to do business? So what the FTC, the courts currently today are not enforcing it. It's something...
Not enforcing non-competes or not enforcing the ban on non-competes?
Not enforcing the ban on non-competes.
So non-competes are still currently valid under the rules?
They're still currently valid. It is something that perhaps will change in the near future. We don't really know that. But...
probably not going to change under Trump's FTC.
I would think that would not be the case.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So what advice, by the way, geographically, what's too much? Can you say Detroit Metro?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's some non-competes where basically the company, it was South America, North America. It was overly broad. So if you've got a presence in those regions, I mean, that can be problematic. Sometimes they break it down to like a mile radius and say, well, you have to be 180 miles away. So maybe you can be in other parts of the state so long as it's within a mile radius.
That is interesting. And depending on the field, that's kind of outdated given like technology nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you are, I don't know, a tradesman where you need physical presence, that would make sense. But like most of the stuff's virtual now, right? Like it doesn't matter a lot of times where your physical office location is, depending. But okay, so what advice would you give? Because I get a lot of call on non-competes because it's an employment issue, but it's its own issue. I mean, it's different, and I generally don't do a lot of non-compete work. I have done. I represented this guy. He was. It was in Oakland County in front of Judge Warren, and. This guy, he passed away tragically now, but he worked for Orkin. Okay, he was a pest control guy.
Yeah.
So he went around and sprayed for ants and shit like that. And Orkin had a very strict non-compete.
Oh, wow.
And
not surprising.
Yeah, exactly. Not surprising. So this guy opened up his own business. It was called Noble Pest Control. And then he might have taken a lot of Orkin's clients because he went around and said, I'll do the job for, half the price that Orkin's ripping you off on, right?
Yeah.
And so he got the clients. I mean, these weren't big. It wasn't a big business, Angela. It was like, he did like the Mexican restaurant down the street. He did I think he did a school or whatever. So, and I started using this guy after, because if you have pest control problems, Noble Pest Control, I'll give him a shot. I think his brother took over the company or whatever, but he was the nicest guy. But anyways, I mean, they really put the screws to him, Orkin, because he had this non-compete. And, he started his own business. And I mean, if he would have lost the case, the court would have shut down his business essentially.
Yeah.
And we ended up countersuing Orkin because Orkin had went around, one of Orkin's agents had went around and said, that guy's a really bad pest control guy. He was screwing things up. So, you want leverage, right? So that was defamation. Yeah. So we countersued Orkin for defamation for telling the community that this guy was a bad pest controller. When he wasn't, they were just salty.
Yeah.
We ended up resolving the case. I forget what happened. There was some agreement, but
you could also argue tortious interference with
tortious interference. I think we did do that as well. It was a long time ago, but that was my foray into the non-compete.
So what happened
world.
to the little guy? I mean,
we resolved it.
Oh,
like
okay.
it became
That's
a headache.
good.
I became such a thorn in their side. I filed like motions all the time. And
oh my goodness.
I drove them crazy enough that Orkin was basically like, all right,
we're spending too much money on this case for this guy who's probably
this little
not
crazy
going to...
aggressive lawyer. They eventually they didn't give up, but they're like, just let's just go our separate ways. Like,
Yeah, they just agreed to not enforce it.
Yeah. Orkin's still around. They're not hurting.
No. But I'm happy to hear your guy's still doing good.
Well, he died, so he's not doing good. But, he died, but his brother, because I called and they're like, he died. He passed away of cancer. I hope it wasn't because of the all those pesticides.
Yeah,
and shit
with
that
Montesable, we're on that case.
The Monsanto,
Monsanto, yeah.
Well, they just got hit for over $100 million in Washington, where there was a school that had been leaking out
Poison?
the Roundup poison.
Yeah, Roundup, exactly. That's right.
And
Yeah.
had killed all these kids that had went to that school, and the janitors all got horrible cancer and diseases and stuff.
Yeah.
It's nasty stuff. I'm always very careful with, we had another case now that we're talking about pest control, but this
Law can take you so
law
many
can
places.
take you so many places. There was a hair salon, and it was in a strip mall, and there's, a wall in between the salon and then in the strip mall, it's a strip with 6 different business spots in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's like
We
the
represent
salon.
developers.
Yeah. Well, there's a wall in between the salon and the neighboring place. It was like a restaurant or a bar or something, right? So you have the restaurant in the strip mall, wall, which is essentially
Probably paper thin.
paper thin, and it's hollow in the middle, right? So the walls are built with, there's a wood plank.
Like 2x4.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
You can hear everything.
You can hear
probably.
everything. So the restaurant had some pest problems. So they hired a pest guy in the middle of the day who came in. There's all these people sitting in the salon, and all of a sudden all this smoke starts getting pumped into the salon.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
pesticide and poison. So all these people are chilling there, and they start choking and coughing on pesticides because the bonehead pest control guy just started shooting it into the wall, but it was leaking out into the salon.
So who did you represent?
We represent the salon and the people that got hurt, but I said,
Yeah.
look, we got to wait and see if. Unfortunately, you have to wait and see if there's
Any damage?
any damages,
I
which
know.
is crazy. People
I
may say
know.
that's crazy, but like Michigan doesn't have what's called medical monitoring. In some states, you can sue and say, look, you need to pay for doctors to monitor these people to see if they're going to get hurt or not. Michigan doesn't have medical monitoring. But anyways,
Why do you think that is?
because we had a really bad Supreme Court for so long who said, I think it was Dow Chemical case where Dow had deposited dioxin, which is a very toxic chemical that was used in Vietnam for deforestation.
wow.
They would drop this chemical on like the Viet Cong and like in forests, and it would just kill the forest. So imagine if that chemical is just going to just completely kill everything, all the vegetation, what it's going to do to the human body.
And you got to wait for somebody to die before you can file. a
Yeah,
lawsuit.
you got to wait till you get cancer or you die. So there was
Yeah.
a big case. This dioxin had been stored and used and dumped into the Tittabawassee River. It then was getting on people's property when the river would overflow. And so these little kids were playing in front yards next to the river that were covered full of this toxic chemical. But the problem with these toxic torts is you get exposed to like this Monsanto case right now in Washington. You get exposed to this chemical. You may not develop cancer for like 15 years or whatever it is. You don't
horrible.
get cancer the next day.
No.
Right? So
And by that time, there's so many intervening causes
Exactly.
that people can say contributed to it or escalated or wasn't the real cause of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very unfortunate.
So they brought a claim in that case for what's called medical monitoring. They said, look, we don't know if these people are going to die or get cancer or not, but we shouldn't have to wait until they poisoned the river. They poisoned these people's property. They should have to pay for testing or doctors to do these tests to make sure that these people are not getting poisoned. And our Supreme Court at that time said, no, that's not a case because in Michigan, you have to wait till there's an actual injury because you can't prove that these people suffered an injury. We're not going to allow it. I think it's bullshit, but
Interesting.
I don't make the law. Okay, I just try
You
to
will when you
follow.
become judge.
Oh boy, not me. Not me. Well, all right, I'm getting the wrap it up from my production crew, which means, as usual, we've went over time. But thank you so much for coming on the show. We talked about some very interesting things, and it's so good to see your career and see you downtown with your partner Butch, and you guys are doing such great work. And
Thank
so if you need
you.
election law, if you have a non-compete, or you got poisoned by Monsanto, call Angela Baldwin at the Miller Law Firm.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Angela. All right, everyone, it's been another awesome Cases Gone Wild. A special thanks to my guest, Angela Baldwin of the Miller Law Firm, for coming on the show. Please give us a thumbs up, share with your friends and family. If you or a loved one need help, don't hesitate to contact us. Go to our website, www.markolaw.com, M-A-R-K-O law.com. Give us a call, 833-MARKO-LAW, M-A-R-K-O law. And please, if you are interested in learning how to up your practice as a personal injury, criminal defense attorney, please come June 20th and 21st in Detroit. We're bringing in some of the biggest names from around the country for the Michigan Trial Lawyers Summit. Go to mtlsummit.com and register today. We'll see you in another 2 weeks. God bless. Have a wonderful day for another Cases Gone Wild.